In the quiet, heavily guarded corridors of Windsor Castle, a single piece of canvas can carry the weight of an entire empire. For decades, Camilla, the Queen Consort, believed she had finally rewritten history, methodically replacing the painful memories of the past with her own family's quiet ascension. But on a recent evening, as she walked toward the historic private apartments, she froze before a wall that had been systematically altered without her knowledge or consent. The massive gold-framed portrait of the late Princess Diana, which Camilla had carefully ordered into deep storage years ago, was hanging under a perfectly aimed gallery light, while her own freshly commissioned family insignia had been quietly relocated to a dark corridor reserved for administrative staff. This was the exact moment Camilla realized that despite the glittering crown on her head, the permanent machinery of the institution had begun its silent, devastating eviction of her entire legacy. What looked like a routine curatorial update inside the palace was actually a masterclass in modern institutional warfare. In this video, we will unpack the high-stakes, behind-the-scenes chess match that has recently unfolded within the British royal family. We will examine the secret administrative maneuver Camilla attempted to secure her family's permanent footprint in the royal archives, the precise moment Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, discovered the paper trail, and the chillingly quiet retaliation that followed. By the end of this account, you will understand how the illusion of absolute power can instantly disintegrate when confronted with the cold, unyielding reality of bloodline authority. This is not a story of loud arguments or public scandals, but rather a forensic look at how the palace uses administrative protocol to execute a flawless psychological defeat. To comprehend the true gravity of this psychological collapse, one must first look at the immense fortress of influence Camilla had spent 30 years constructing. Following her highly controversial ascension to the throne alongside King Charles, she operated under the assumption that her position was finally unassailable. For years, there had been a subtle, calculated erasure of Diana's legacy from the physical spaces of the monarchy. Private sitting rooms were redecorated, long-standing patronages were quietly shifted, and Camilla's non-royal children and grandchildren began appearing at the center of historic state occasions. To the outside world, it appeared she had achieved the impossible, transforming herself from the most criticized figure in modern British history into the undisputed matriarch of the House of Windsor. She believed that as long as Charles held the scepter, her authority was absolute, and her family's permanent place in history was guaranteed. But absolute power within the British monarchy is often a dangerous illusion, especially when it is fueled by a sense of commercial desperation rather than constitutional permanence. The trigger for this current crisis occurred when Camilla attempted her most ambitious administrative power grab yet. Seeking to codify her family's status before any potential future transition of the crown, she quietly initiated a series of structural requests through the Royal Collection Trust. The plan was highly sophisticated. She sought to officially archive a vast collection of Diana's personal letters, photographs, and historical artifacts, moving them out of the primary royal residences and into a remote regional repository under the guise of long-term preservation. In their place, Camilla aimed to permanently install her own curated legacy, establishing dedicated exhibition spaces and official portraits that would tie her own bloodline inextricably to the physical real estate of the crown. It was a subtle bureaucratic attempt to rewrite the visual memory of the monarchy for generations to come. However, Camilla drastically underestimated the meticulous vigilance of the modern Prince of Wales. As the absolute controller of the Duchy of Cornwall and the future sovereign, Prince William has spent years quietly monitoring the internal administration of the royal estates. The discovery of the paper trail happened during a routine review of estate allocations and curatorial transfers. When William and Catherine were briefed on the unusual urgency behind these archiving requests, the true nature of the strategy became instantly clear. It was not an innocent curatorial update, but a direct assault on the memory of the late Princess of Wales and a calculated attempt to elevate non-royal entities at the expense of the core institution. For William, the threat to his mother's legacy was deeply personal. But the institutional response from the Wales camp would be entirely professional, cold, and devastatingly precise. Instead of instigating a public confrontation or allowing the matter to leak into a chaotic tabloid war, William and Catherine chose to weaponize the system itself. They understood that, in the world of high-stakes royal diplomacy, the most brutal blows are delivered through protocol space and quiet isolation. Utilizing William's extensive authority over key estate decisions and consulting closely with Princess Anne, the ultimate keeper of royal discipline, a silent counter-strategy was set into motion. The retaliation did not involve raised voices or dramatic scenes, but was executed through the quiet signatures of senior courtiers and the precise movements of palace staff. Within 48 hours, the administrative trap began to close around the Queen Consort, transforming her daily reality into a series of deeply humiliating symbolic boundaries. The first sign of this institutional dismantling occurred in the layout of the palace itself. The private offices dedicated to Camilla's personal staff, which had slowly migrated toward the primary royal apartments, were suddenly reassigned to a remote wing of the estate, accessible only through a secondary side door. Palace security protocols were quietly updated, revoking certain unrestricted access passes that Camilla's inner circle had taken for granted for months. But the most devastating psychological blow was the sudden restoration of Diana's presence in the core viewing areas. The historic portrait, a vivid reminder of the true line of succession, was brought out of storage and placed in the exact location where Camilla had planned to host an upcoming high-profile diplomatic reception, ensuring that every guest would walk past the image of the true Princess of Wales. As Camilla walked through the residence that evening, observing the physical manifestation of her stripped authority, the magnitude of her miscalculation became blindingly clear. The side doors, the locked archive rooms, and the prominent display of the woman she had spent a lifetime trying to overshadow were not mere coincidences. They were forensic proof of a massive shifting of power. She had spent decades playing a complex game of influence, only to realize that when the core institution decides to protect itself, a consort stands entirely alone. The illusion of her absolute empire had vanished, replaced by the terrifying realization that she actually owned nothing within these historic walls. And that is where the story takes its most chilling turn. Standing in the quiet corridor faced with the unmistakable evidence of her strategic defeat, Camilla turned to the one person who had always validated her ambition. She demanded an immediate intervention, a reversal of the orders, and a restoration of her administrative authority. But as she looked at King Charles, she did not find the fierce defender she expected. Instead, she was met with a heavy, devastating silence. The king, caught between the unyielding reality of his own health challenges, the constitutional future of his son, and the immense weight of the crown, simply looked away. The trap had snapped shut, and Camilla was left standing in the shadow of the portrait she thought she had destroyed forever. That heavy, devastating silence from King Charles was not an act of malice, but an act of institutional survival. To understand why he refused to intervene on Camilla's behalf, one must understand the psychological transformation that occurs when a Prince of Wales finally takes the throne. For decades, Charles and Camilla operated as a united front, fighting against the palace machinery to legitimize their relationship. But the moment the crown was placed on his head, Charles ceased to be a rebel and became the chief custodian of a 1,000-year-old corporation. He knows better than anyone that his reign is transitional. His legacy relies entirely on a smooth transfer of power to Prince William. By looking away and allowing William's administrative trap to remain in place, Charles made a cold, calculated choice. He chose the survival of the bloodline over the comfort of his wife. For Camilla, who had spent 30 years believing she was the only voice that truly mattered to him, this realization was the ultimate psychological betrayal. But the true devastation of this silent retaliation goes far beyond a relocated portrait or a locked door. It strikes at the very heart of what can only be described as commercial desperation. For years, The illusion of Camilla's absolute power was funded by a bank she no longer has the keys to. When she married Charles, she married the Prince of Wales, a man who possessed unchecked control over the Duchy of Cornwall, a billion-dollar private estate that funds the heir's public, private, and charitable endeavors. That vast wealth provided a comfortable umbrella that quietly sheltered Camilla's inner circle, her private staff, and the subtle elevation of her own children. However, the exact moment Queen Elizabeth passed away, that entire financial apparatus immediately transferred to Prince William. The stark, undeniable reality is that Queen Camilla actually owns nothing. She does not own Windsor Castle. She does not own Buckingham Palace. She does not control the sovereign grant, and she has zero equity in the Duchy of Cornwall. She is, in the coldest legal terms, a highly titled guest residing in properties managed by her stepson. William has masterfully weaponized this financial and territorial reality. He did not need to scream, issue public statements, or leak furious stories to the press. He simply used the administrative power of the landlord. What viewers and royal insiders have noticed over the past several months is a systematic audit of estate allocations. The private payrolls, the housing grants for extended staff, and the discretionary budgets that Camilla once utilized to build her shadow court have been quietly reviewed and ruthlessly streamlined by the Wales camp. By moving her staff to a secondary wing and revoking unrestricted access passes, William was sending a very clear, untraceable message. He was reminding her that every inch of floor space she occupies and every staff member she commands exists solely at his administrative discretion. This is the staggering exploitation of protocol, turning the boring machinery of palace management into a lethal weapon of containment. While William systematically dismantled the financial and administrative scaffolding of Camilla's empire, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, executed the emotional and visual takeover. Catherine's power has always been her uncomplaining sacrifice and her flawless understanding of visual symbolism. She did not need to engage in a territorial dispute over office space. Instead, Catherine simply stepped into the void, bringing the unmistakable aesthetic and moral authority of the late Princess Diana with her. When Catherine authorized the curatorial update that brought Diana's portrait back into the central diplomatic reception room, she was not just decorating a hallway. She was placing a psychological checkmate on the chessboard. That detail matters immensely. At the upcoming state reception, Camilla will be forced to stand beneath the gilded image of the woman whose life she derailed, greeting foreign dignitaries in a room that visually belongs to the Wales bloodline. Catherine will arrive wearing the iconic jewelry of her late mother-in-law, physically embodying the continuity of the true royal family. The visual contrast will be devastating. On one side, a queen consort stripped of her private power, forced to rely on a husband who cannot protect her from the administrative machinery. On the other side, a Princess of Wales who commands the loyalty of the institution, the love of the public, and the full weight of the future. It is a total institutional erasure of Camilla's long-term legacy plan, executed without a single word being spoken out of turn. Furthermore, this silent eviction is being strictly enforced by Princess Anne, the family's most formidable guardian of protocol. Anne has never forgotten the damage inflicted upon her mother's reign by the scandals of the 90s. Working in tandem with William, Anne has ensured that the traditional rules of the royal diary are rigidly applied to Camilla. What appears to be a sudden adherence to old-fashioned etiquette is actually a strategic mechanism to isolate the Queen Consort. By limiting Camilla's solo engagements and ensuring that her non-royally family members are no longer granted premium positioning at state events, Anne and William have effectively closed the gates. They have built an invisible wall around the core monarchy, ensuring that the history books will record Camilla as a temporary consort, not the founding matriarch of a new royal era. Ultimately, this is why the story of the hidden portrait and the locked doors resonates so deeply. It exposes the brutal, unyielding nature of the British monarchy. You can manipulate the press, you can win over the monarch, and you can even place a crown upon your own head. But you cannot rewrite the bloodline, and you cannot outmaneuver the permanent institution when it decides to correct its course. Camilla played a 30-year game of strategy, only to discover that the final move belonged to the son of the woman she tried to erase. She is now trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, surrounded by the ghosts of the past. Fully aware that the moment the reign ends, her illusion of power will vanish into the administrative archives forever. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of royal power. If you found this forensic analysis insightful, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming investigations into the silent wars behind palace gates.